All right. Thank you so much for attending. My name is Andrea Montgomery. I'm a BenGap Fellow. I'm also the 2022 LGBTHWC Conference Administrator. And I'm so excited about the talk this morning, this panel session, that mental health and well-being of a service member, where we're going to dive in and hit some personal experience from our panelists about their time in the military throughout the Don't Ask, Don't Tell era. Now, what is Don't Ask, Don't Tell? Anybody familiar? Hands up in the room. All right, we're familiar with those in the but don't have their hands up. I'll just give you a brief thing. So in 1994, policy went into place for the military that said that in short term that you can't be out, right? You can't let it be known that you are a part of the LGBTQ community or you're risking discharge, right? And so over the course of those 1994 to 2011, that's one of the hardships that we had to deal with, right? And so I'm honored today to be a moderator for this session for these three esteemed panelists that lived through that era, right? So to my left, we have First Sergeant, currently still serving, First Sergeant Jonathan Cuevas. We have Master Sergeant retired Liz Davis, and on the end, we have retired Staff Sergeant Lenny Adams. All right. And so this morning to our panelists, I want to ask the question for you to discuss with the audience from your personal and professional experience, reflecting back on living throughout the Don't Ask, Don't Tell era, and 10 years later, after the repeal, what impact did that have on you throughout your military career?
I guess I'll start.
Yeah.
You're both looking at me.
I don't like microphones.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Like she said, I'm First Sergeant Cuevas. I'm still currently serving. I've been serving for the last 24 years. I joined the military in 1998, still serving strong. Back then, it was not easy. It took a toll on our mental health and the fact that in the military, we're asked to one of our main values is integrity, but the first thing we're asked to do is lie. From the day that you join, you have to sign a waiver saying that you are not part of the LGBT community. So the first thing you're asked to do is lie when you're also told to tell the truth. So from 1998 to 2011, having to maintain your personal life a secret, changing your pronouns 24/7. If you're out in the street with your partner, walking away from them because you see your fellow soldiers, allowing the ridicules and the harassment to happen because if you report it to your command, an investigation gets open and then you have the possibility of getting discharged or worse. Because if you are active duty, you can also face jail time for being in the community. So, living through that era was not easy, was never easy, but we love what we do. So we take it and we go with it because we want to be able to serve. My experience, it was always, I was in the same company for the longest time. So after years, people start questioning. You never bring a female around. You never talk about a female, well, I have pretend females. But, so people start questioning, the harassment start, and then you get people that want to out you because they want the truth. So they start lying and accusing you of things that you do not do. Anything from sexual harassment to sexual assault, anything just to out you, to get you in trouble and get you out. And then having to live a life where, if wake up's at 4:30 in the morning, you wake up at 3 in the morning so you can use the shower alone. So nobody ever so that way you never give somebody a reason to talk. So, you wake up an hour earlier, you do everything in hiding, serving overseas during deployments also felt lonely because you cannot talk about your personal life. You can't do anything. The supports are not there for you. So when you're feeling homesick or you're missing whatever, you feel alone. I had a couple people that knew because they were also in the closet, they were also hiding, but it's not the same. So as you move up in the ranks, it becomes a little harder because people look at you as a role model and some people want to knock you down because they're like, we're not going to allow this to be part of our leadership. So it becomes a little harder. when 2011, when they got repealed, it was life-changing. That's when, you knock those walls down, you spread the wings, you can finally be who you are. And you think it's that easy, but you still have some people out there that still don't like it, still don't want to see it. We still have soldiers and leadership that don't want to see females in the military. So, it's changing and it's progressing, but we're still behind the normal society. Being an openly first sergeant now, it's fun and it's nice because now my junior soldiers can see and have a role model. They have it a lot easier. They don't know what we went through, but it's still challenging in the fact that, again, you still have some people out there that don't want, especially if you live in areas where, I live more in the city area, but if you come from more of the rural areas and your upbringing is a little stronger, it's still hard, to hear the comments or to hear stuff like that. So it's hard, it's never easy. Again, 24 years in and then still hear some comments from certain people. But I think that's what drives us to continue on. And that's what kind of drives us to stay in is you're going to talk and I'm going to prove you wrong. And you're just giving me more fuel to keep going. So, again, 24 years strong, currently in the Sergeant Major's Academy now to get my final rank because I can't go any higher. So, but again, never allowing others to stop you, just give you more fuel to just keep going. So, Liz.
And I get to follow you on top. So Liz Davis, I'm a retired Master Sergeant, 24 years in the United States military. So I'm not going to really ditto a lot. So I don't want to just repeat it. So I'll go a little more in depth. And with stories of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I joined February 14th, 1991, Valentine's Day. It was my true love's country and flag. I bleed red, white, and blue. Growing up, my father hung the flag and we took it down every day because there was no light. Well, I lost him at 10. So I knew it wasn't a job. It wasn't a career. It was a dream, a passion. It was a calling for me to serve this great nation. The hardest thing is when I went to join, it was 91 before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So they bluntly asked you about being gay. I mean, I didn't lie. I was never with the same sex, but it kind of like off the bat, something I dreamed of my whole life. I pretty much had to become somebody else the day I raised my hand at 18 years old. Even though I waited Valentine's Day, my true love is nothing more important to me than this country. So I did it. I readjusted my life. Got that hurricane, Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So you think, wow, this is great. Don't ask, don't tell. It didn't change much. You still live your life in hiding. So I was in a relationship pretty much in the beginning of my career at 19 years old. So she had 2 kids that were 3 and 5. They became my children. Well, guess what? No one could know. So when they came with me, we lived together. They're my kids. I raised them. They're my sons. They're still my sons, and I got 5 grandkids. They're my children. Well, to the military, they weren't. So they get to come to the base and this and that. And I had to teach my sons at a young age to lie. They knew that they had another mother who gave birth to them. So I was the aunt, but at home or something else. So we did it because the country comes first. And that's what it's all about. I took an oath and I got to put this country before everything, even my family. And that's what we did. And we trucked along. Then you keep going. And then I had a daughter. So now I'm married to a woman and I got married during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Okay. I didn't wait for them to lift it. So this time I watched my sons. I had to teach them to lie. And as Top said, it's integrity, honor, pride. I mean, you stand there, you represent the greatest nation. And I got to teach now my kids to lie. So it takes a burden. It takes a toll on soldiers, not just with the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the before, the during, the after. So my daughter would come, well, I'm mommy. Well, I got to tell her when she mentioned the other mommy, my command's looking. And I'm like, ooh, pulling my arm like, and I'm pulling her out of the room. Oh, you got to go potty because she was young. Then I started telling my little daughter. Now this is almost 15 years later to lie, right? I'm like, this is wrong. And I started getting a bit more open. Why? We were still not allowed to. So I rocked the boat. But I got tired of living a lie for my country. I'm defending everybody's freedom, their First Amendment right. But my family didn't have that. We still don't have it today. It's amazing. And I was always about the one flag that represented, not a rainbow flag, because that flag represents all. And honestly, through the time and through my 24 years, my outlook changed. Believe me, my country is still my priority. I will never be part of an insurrection to this country for saying the military did me wrong or my country did me wrong. Why? Because we're the United States of America and we need to unite for this great nation. No matter what happens to us, we put our nation first. That's what we do as proud Americans. So now when you go through, my daughter and I'm married now, and the burden of a clearance comes, you have to do security clearance. Yeah, right, you chuckle because I think you kind of went through that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I can't do my clearance. I'm a senior NCO. I need that security clearance now to stay in. It's not a job to me. This is my dream. Like, it's not just a career. So it's to this whole other level that now you're like, what do? I have to dodge it. Now you're kind of a little unethical, right? I'm dodging protocols that I know I have to do as a senior NCO. And I have younger enlisted looking up to you as a leader. And I still had to dodge it. And I did. And then when it came time to do the clearance, I was married and it was legal. But I had to go through so much dishonestness in my career as I'm standing there wearing a uniform saying how proud I am. And you start looking back. And that's why I want to say thank you for asking me to come to this panel, because I never actually in depth looked at what being gay in the military, what the sacrifice I made and my whole family made for this great nation. And I was like, wow. And the more you look, and like overseas, when I did my tour over there, remind you of my sons. They're not really mine. I came home on R&R. My sons' worlds fell apart. They got into drugs. Their mother, which was my ex, were not together anymore, took the wrong road in life, which a lot of us do and need help. I couldn't be there for my own sons. I got back on a plane and headed back overseas, which rightfully, that's what I raised my hand to do, defend this great nation. So I'm trying to discuss things over there because they were sending people home. And I said, well, I'd like to be on this flight going home. My sons need me. Well, Eric came. You don't have a family care plan. That's an Article 15 I can get. Do what? They're not legally my sons because I'm gay. And this is, they're not, see, you're in this whole catch-22. While you're in a combat zone. Now I'm supposed to be worried about defending, being a leader, keeping my soldiers safe. And now I'm dealing with stuff at home. I'm dealing with, well, you don't have a care plan. It's all my fault. So long story short, I got home. My two sons' worlds were tore apart. And thank you to the Lord above, they're on the right path. They're doing great, but it was years it took for them to get back on that path. And me being in the military, I think did more damage. But I'm going to go into one other story that I would say was the biggest turning point for me to fight the military on GLBT, even after Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I've been at the White House several times with Mr. Obama, with my family. So my son joined, as I told you the story of my dad. Well, our family, every generation served this great nation, and every single conflict our family has served in. So my son joined. Now, remind you, he just lived his whole life through this, right? The military did not accept his family. The military looked down upon his family. And what does he do? He went and raised that hand to go defend this great nation after everything they did to him growing up. We did not make it known he was my son. I'm a senior NCO. This is his career. Yours to behold. The biggest regret I have, my son was it Walk School, PLDC, but they renamed it. And he gave me a call and goes, Mom, I don't know how do you do this? You're so full of hate. And he's not letting anybody know he's gay. I said, honey, you pick this field for your country. You need to just suck up, drive on. That's what we do. Boy, that was the wrong thing to say. A little hard. But so we move a little forward. I get a call in the middle of the night. My sons in the ICU, the cardiac one. He was tased directly in his heart. My son is in his 20s. Okay, he's been in the military a couple of years, and it's during his drill. My son was targeted for being gay. What did his mother tell him? The one that just spent her whole career, right? Suck it up. Ignore him. I almost lost my son. I am in that hospital begging him to put a pacemaker in his chest. He says, no, Mom, I don't deserve to live. They made that clear to me. Are you kidding me? My son got his pacemaker. Sergeant Major was in his room. We had words. I then was informed I should watch out for my career. I don't give a about my career. This is my son. I've never put my career before any of my soldiers. So you think for my son, I would? And it came to a point, is your country first or your family? And that was my turning point to really stand up the GLBT all around military now. Because when you see it so firsthand, you can hide your life. You don't realize the impact it has on other people that are watching you. So you can be the leader that leads right to say this is wrong and take the heat. And that's what I did. I told the military, if you have an issue with people being gay, I'm gay, you bring it to me. Because I can take the beat. And these are young kids. And on the outside, being gay was already accepted. Well, in the military, it's not. And it's still not. Because my son wasn't targeted for Don't Ask, Don't Tell because it was lifted. So they targeted him another way because he was gay. So just because they lifted Don't Ask, Don't Tell, you are still targeted because you happen to love somebody. All because you just want to defend your country for everybody else's rights. So to go down of the impact, I really just want to hone in because you guys are all medical here, right? I believe. And I want, when someone goes, what I've learned by really thinking of this to come and speak is, when I went to my medical professions, I hid everything. Why? Because I was with a woman. And what taught me is I went to the VA and I needed a surgery after my deployment. I was open to the doctor there. I thought it was confidential. So they sent me out to Yale for surgery. And in the write-up showed I had a woman because now I got to take my medical records to the military because I won't be at work. You want to talk about a panic? I can't turn in my medical records because right here in writing says for me to have a hysterectomy. Oh, did it stop? For me to have a hysterectomy, I'm also with a woman, so I'm not going to bear another child. I already bared my child. And I'm like, she didn't do it. The doctor didn't do it to be mean. She just didn't know the rules of the military because she was a civilian at the VA. So now that brought me to really pull back with medical professions. And I didn't tell the truth a lot. When I go for surgery, I'd be more scared that, are you going to cut me the wrong way and kill me because I'm gay now? I mean, you got to remember my whole life in the military, you're gay. It's so wrong. So you have this. And that's what I really hope everybody takes out of this. Like if you have a prior soldier, matter if it's before, during, or after Don't Ask, Don't Tell, try to really get to know them so they can open up and trust you. I am so fortunate now that I have a primary care that I can open up to. But even recently battling breast cancer, I was holding back. And luckily my wife was there to say stuff because, and I didn't realize it until I thought of all this stuff I wanted to say today, that, wow, that put such trauma on me mentally. Never realized it. And it's kind of a form of PTSD. And I'm hoping people start looking at that way because I do feel the soldiers that lived through it or still living through it really need some help to actually get to the other side of this because it was a lot of damage done and still happening to our soldiers. Thank you.
You get to follow that. Great. So my name is Lenny Adams. I joined in June 28th of 2000. I was a sophomore. I was a junior in high school. I was 17 years old. I retired in December of 2020, which is terrifying to think. Like I found out like what the last day I had to serve was, and I popped smoke and was out of there. I was like, okay, we're good. It was. I was admin, so I knew exactly what I needed to do to get out, and then told everybody, you know, how to get there. So that's what I did. So my story is a little bit convoluted in a lot of ways. So one of the biggest stressors facing LGBTQ people in the world in general is internalized homophobia. It's beaten into us that you are wrong and that you're less than, separate from, whatever words you want to use, whatever preposition you want to throw in there. But as much as that bothers you, In the military, we have a huge issue with sexual assault. And it's not just against women. So when I was on a drill weekend, I was 19 years old. It was 2002. It was August, and I had gone out on a date on a drill weekend. And nobody knew. It was nobody's business. It was fine. It was on my own time. That date went horribly wrong. And I had to go to work the next day with a smile on my face and not tell anybody what happened. It was terrible. There's been a lot of therapy. I became a therapist because of things like that. Amen. So it's things like that that are commonplace. You think you get hurt. I mean, for some people in our community, some people in this world, going to the police is not a safe thing. I understand that. Talking to your senior enlisted that you've been sexually assaulted and like hurt, like I had bruised ribs. I couldn't go to the hospital, couldn't do anything. I had to go to the VA a couple of years later, and they asked me why. The doctor who was there was very nice. I felt terrible afterward. He was talking to me, and he, for whatever reason, the smell, the whatever, I was on that date again, and that was very bad. So I had a little panic attack and flipped out in the middle of the ER, and all of a sudden every psychiatrist was there. It's like, oh, hey, how are you? It's fun times. Let's relive this trauma again. And I had to explain to them what had happened, because obviously I did not want to be committed to the psych ER. So I told them what had happened, and now that information got put in my medical record at the VA, and it's 2002. Luckily, I worked for the State Medical Command. I was very lucky under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I was very lucky. I was in a unit with an older senior enlisted woman who was an out lesbian. Everybody knew. Bernice had her wife. She had 3 kids. They went up to Massachusetts, got married. She said, screw Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I'm getting married. I was like, okay. Because Connecticut had civil union, didn't even have civil unions yet, but Massachusetts had got marriage at that point. And she said, I'm getting married. And I said, you can't do that. She goes, yeah, I'm going to do that. You can't do that. She goes, screw them. I'm doing what I want. I've been in for 38 years. But I also was in the State Medical Command, and I was kind of, I was smart. So that kind of forgave that. I was lucky that being intelligent got me out of a lot of problems, because I couldn't be replaced because I knew too much. And I knew where the bodies were buried. And I will spill your tea. But I had a lot of respect too. So people, it was like, yes, I kiss boys and I will kick your ass. So I say it all the time. I'm 6'2". I'm 350 pounds. I will beat you senseless and watch RuPaul's Drag Race. So if I'm nothing but funny. So my boss got the medical records when they transferred them from the VA. And I walked in the next day, not thinking that all of the medical records were there. But when they know something has changed, and there's that very tense feeling in the room, you're sitting there going, oh, you got all the medical records. Oh, you read all of the medical records. Okay, can you burn page 36 through 42, please? And they didn't. And I actually got them. I actually took the physical paper. I was lucky. I was the medical records administrator for the state of Connecticut for a while. I had a whole separate medical record. I had also been diagnosed with HIV during my time in the military. I was allowed to stay. So that was great, because I was, again, indispensable. AR 600-110, if you need to know, maintenance and surveillance of people with HIV. That's being changed too. But that, again, is part of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. How do we get rid of you? You're not safe. Oh, now we have this disease and we can kick you out because of this. I don't know if anybody saw this, but in the last 2 weeks, they are changing. This really pisses me off. They're changing the rules about what service members positions you could hold if you have HIV. Because now it's just a manageable chronic condition. Because when they told me I was going to die next week, that was not true, by the way. It was 2009. Like, there was plenty of heart. But these things, these moments that are separate from Don't Ask, Don't Tell, contribute to every moment afterward. You don't trust yourself. I'm sitting here in front of a bunch of medical professionals. I'm sitting here going, I have the most imposter syndrome I've ever had. You don't care what I have to say. I'm like, no, they do. I'm funny. But like those moments, like don't ask, don't tell beats that out of you. So add that compounded trauma over time to everything. You know, I'm going to apply for this job. They don't want to hear it. You're gay. And for the military, which is like supposed to be the great equalizer. I mean, how many more push-ups you can do obviously made you better than, you know, how smart you were, but that's why they were better at PT. That's why they got higher ranks than I did. I couldn't do it. I mean, hello. But yeah, those kinds of things they put in so that we were held back. And, you know, I'm lucky to sit next to these people who made it like to the top. Like that was awesome. I was indispensable, but you guys got more pay. So there you go.
It's all about the pay.
It's all about the pay.
Did you want us to?
We can keep talking. So checking the chat, and Dr. Kenneth Dominguez put in the chat. Thanks for sharing your stories. These are very compelling narratives that all healthcare professionals should hear. And he said, we need to develop a curricula for medical schools that can incorporate these narratives. And so I have a question for you all. Being in the military now, this is an honor for me to have them on the panel, because when I came in 2014, I was a female, Black, I had locks, which I had to cut, you know, my first time around, you know, and then I'm a lesbian. I come from my dad's side of the family, military, right? And you didn't say it. Like even before I signed that dotted line, I was told a lie, right? You better not say that you like what you like, you know, because that's going to cause you problems downstream. And so with that, on my, you know, translating that over on the civilian side, you know, how is it that, you know, me wanting to go to be a physician, clinician, or going, you know, into a professional graduate school, how can I guess, excel per se on the military side, you know, with my soldiers coming up, to be able to translate that with, you know, going into a medical professional field? That sounds like a confusing question.
Somewhat, yeah. It's like 3 questions.
All right. So military side, civilian side, you know, being a lesbian in the military, being an NCO, as well as going to graduate school to be a leader. Right. And so how is it that we don't repeat the same mistakes, you know, that were.
You can go first.
Yes. You want it, honey?
No, okay.
Okay. So I think kind of what is great, because you being military and you're living through it. And that's what's great about medical school, all different schools, is that when you bring all walks of life together and they incorporate it into the education, now you can get it out. So by you living it, doing panels like this, you can communicate that even in open discussion in your class and say, listen, I think we need to hone down, like if someone's military and they happen to be GLBTQ community, we need to reach out a little bit further for our patients, that they might be locked down a little bit. They might be scared to communicate with us, which, you know, that's their health. And they need to be able to, you know, I should be able to walk in and be like, hey, you're my doctor. I can tell you anything. I'm telling you right now, that's not me, because of my past, that I still have that fear. I'm getting better at it. But so I think the part of communicating and showing, I would say, like now, this past I just had another surgery, and, you know, I was like, this is my wife. And the nurse didn't skip a beat. She kind of did almost like a skip, like, well, hello, you know, and I will tell you, before I went under the knife, that made me feel so good. Because as I said before, I get scared sometimes. I've had a lot of surgery and I keep thinking, geez, if they don't like me, they're going to kill me under this knife. And it's just going to be, you know, some accident. And imagine that every time you go under. Well, this time it was a skip. She was so happy I had a wife. And I was like, and then immediately when they laughed to my wife, oh, we got to support her. I feel so safe right now, which then took the stress off my wife that has to now wait all these hours, because it was the first time. Okay, I'm going to be 50. So the first time I looked at my wife and said, I feel safe going into this surgery. This is my 13th or 14th surgery. It took that many because I met a medical profession that made me feel whole, made me feel human. It was okay. So I think by you being part of it, bringing it into the medical and doing stuff like this, and then you all bring it when, into the medical field in education, we will overcome this because of all of you, what you're doing in the medical field. I'm hoping I kind of covered that, right? Okay.
I think going into the field, like Lenny said, most of us get into the medical field. I became a marriage and family therapist, probably because of my past family history and also because of my history being a gay individual. Being a gay Latino, now you have the Latin part in it. Now you got the gay part. Now you got a man part. Like 3 strikes against you already. So we go into the medical field because we feel like now we have a purpose and a calling to help others, to be that voice. I remember when I got into my clinical, going into a clinic where, they didn't care about pronouns. They didn't care about if an individual identified as trans or not. I'm going to call you by what you look like, or I'm going to call you by what your name says. And educating them and being a voice and, helping them change their wording and their documents and helping them, it's huge. Because for somebody to be seen as a human and not as something as like a lot of us got called growing up, that thing, that person, to be looked at as a human and to be treated as a human speaks beyond words. You want to be able to be seen and heard, and most of us didn't get seen growing up in the military or even sometimes even in our civilian sectors. So, not in a positive way. So going into the field where we can now make a stand, a voice, be that voice for the next generation. Everybody says this generation has it so much easier than us. Yes, they do. They do. We're not going to lie. They have it so much easier. They have role models. Everything's on TV now. But at the same time, they still go through a lot that we went through, but just not as much because now it's so openly accepted. They know how to hide it more. And now, social media, they get attacked through there where we got attacked in person. So, being in the military sector, being that first sergeant now in charge of 150 something soldiers and having about 12 openly gay soldiers, 1 trans, it's hard because now I feel like I have to be on my best behavior. I have to be that voice because if I'm not that voice, who's going to be the voice for them? So using your experience, using your profession, use it to your ability to help those that need it because we didn't have it. We had to hide. I still, to this day, I'm going to be 42 years old and I still have internalized homophobia because the military and my culture did that to me. I love my community and I've been very involved in my community. But tell me if I want to hang out with certain groups of people or this and that, I will tell you no. Because you're not going to shame me. I'm not going to look like, other people or that gay guy. We still have it. As much as we want to be out there supporting our community, we still suffered from that. And luckily we have supports and we have family that love us. We have friends, we have partners that support us, but we still have our own issues within. We all probably saw, I know I can speak for myself. I suffer from depression. I suffer from this. And when I remember the last time I wanted to commit suicide was in 2010 while I was deployed. I had my rifle and my bullet ready to go because I didn't have any support. Because I was getting ridiculed from my own soldiers calling me, excuse my language, that fag. I'm not working for that fag. So for you to be that voice and for you guys to be those professionals, to be able to see people for who they are and not for a label or a name or this and that means so much because the littlest things always means the most. So.
No, I got something to say. Okay, interesting. All right, so outside of the military, I mean, and this kind of fits through. I work with kids all day. I'm a school counselor first. I'm a licensed professional counselor second. I'm a father in addition. I have an 11-year-old daughter who's awesome. Those are my soldiers now. And I teach middle school, so I'm like a Spartan warrior. So, that's a thing. But like if you walk in my office, it's everybody says, "Oh, there's no doubting that's where the gay people live." And it's because everybody gives me rainbows. I don't have to buy them anymore. People just keep giving them to me. So I'm like, guys, we don't need any more. But being authentically you is a huge thing. But even with that, talking to kids, like when they don't want to talk to a teacher, which is just like talking to your provider. I am 39 years old next month, and I just got my first primary care provider that I see regularly. She's a wonderful PA, Julia. Good for you. And I sat her down, as I've done with every other provider, because I now feel that if I don't do this, we don't have a good relationship. Okay, so this is what I need from you, and you're going to do this for me. And then they go, huh? And I said, because I'm paying you. And because I need you to do this, because my anxiety is so bad. It's so bad. Because every time I go to a doctor's appointment, I get bad news. So we don't need those moments anymore. But it's the same thing, being authentically you, letting your patient, let your client sit there and tell you, hey, listen, I know that we have 20 minutes for your scheduled appointment. You need 45 today. Mrs. Smith can wait. And I know, like, as I say this about my pediatrician, because anybody pediatricians, anybody? Awesome. Thank you. I love you. You're always running late, and I never mind. And I don't care. You know why I don't care? Because when I need you for 40 minutes to talk about my kid's medical problem, I want you to give me your undivided attention for 45 minutes. Anybody else have kids? Yeah. Y'all been late at the pediatrician's office too, right? That's the thing. But it's a real moment, take the time, let them take their time, because you need to teach people to advocate for themselves. Service members are like middle school students. I hate to say it. They don't understand anything. You will tell them 14 times. They will do it the opposite way. You told them to do it. No, the bullets go that way, honey. What are you doing? Why are you laughing? Why are you laughing? The pews go that way. Apparently I got charisma today. But in sincerity, like, if teaching people to talk like 14-year-olds, we as a community, as a society, have forgotten how to communicate with each other, because these phones get in the way. People don't know what a period is anymore. And that comes out verbally too. People don't know how to express themselves concisely, quickly, authentically. Everything gets confused. That's why I don't text. I call everybody. People hate me. I'm that friend. I will call you. Do not text me. I will call you back. But with that, when you're going through medical school as a leader, when you see something screwed up, say something, because the people who have done it forever are going to continue doing it until you tell them it's wrong. And then when they tell you you're being too loud, say it louder. Because what are they going to do? Kick you out? Well, then you can file a lawsuit. I mean, I hate to say that, but like that's what it's come down to. I was in grad school. I was beaten into submission, because in the military, you are submissive. You will listen to what everybody tells you. I had a grad school professor who, this is really good, ethics. It was ethics as a clinician. And she never opened the final exam. I was an independent study. So I was like, okay, you didn't have me do 5 other examples. So I was like, maybe we're not doing a final exam because it's just me and it's a 100-question multiple choice test. No. She called me at 9:15, the night grades were due, to ask me when I could take it. I went to the associate dean of the School of Education at Southern Connecticut State University. I sat her down. I said, hell no, I'm not taking that test. And they had the audacity to tell me, well, it's on the syllabus. And I said, okay, this is an ethics class. Ethics goes both ways. If you don't say things like that, this was a one class. But doing this, like teaching people to speak this way, like stand up for things when they're wrong. If you see something wrong, you have to fix it. You wouldn't let somebody cut you if they didn't wash their hands, right? That's like the first rule, like wash your hands. People die of the plague because of that. Like if you see somebody doing something wrong and you don't say anything, you're just as culpable. So teach them.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, let me get this microphone.
It's anxiety.
Thank you all for being here. It's very great to hear all of your stories and inspiring. I had a question. Where I do my medical training, about half of our time in our clerkships is spent at a VA, and they never really teach us about like this idea of like what to put in the medical record sort of thing. Is that something that's still an issue and something that like we should be more cognizant about? Like, I guess how much information is there protection for the patient? Yeah. Is there protection for like the information that we put in the medical records at the VA for our patients? Because in like the private sector, I feel like we're kind of pushed to like have a more inclusive like medical record where we like talk about things like sexuality and like gender identity, because we assume it's protected. So like, what should we do at the VA side?
So it's very, very simple and short. Talk to your patient, ask them. And that's all. Any medical person, just talk to your patient, because they'll say, some will say, yeah, I don't care. But I would say, as we just saw with the last term, a swipe of a pen, people were removed from the military again. So if that doesn't put fear back on soldiers so just ask them when they go to the VA, would you like this or this? I mean, it's their life, it's their career. And, thank you for even asking that question. That's a great question for people to carry, and civilian to ask it too. If you know your patient is a soldier, I'd say, hey, what would you like us to put down in this report? I know it needs to go to the military. What would you, and I bet you they'll be like, what? You care about me? You at that moment will build such a bond with that patient that you've never seen. It is amazing.
Girl. So speak to them. A lot of us are still scared. Okay. And like Lenny said earlier, it all depends what MOS, which means your job in the military, you choose. He chose a career where he was able to be more open, more himself, medical field admin. If you pick a field like myself, where I'm combat related, it's a little harder because it's the good old boy club, the macho mentality. Till this day, I just had my PHA, we call it PHA, like our physicals. And every time I go there, I come up as a sexual deviant because I am in a relationship with a man. So I come up as a sexual deviant, and they start asking you every single question about STDs, HIV, everything, just because I sleep with a man. So that little things like that still haunt us. That's why we don't open up. I have white coat syndrome. Like I hate going to medical because of that. Like, because you have a cough. Oh, you're gay? When's the last time you got checked for HIV? Like, are you serious? Are we the only ones that get it? To this day, we're not even allowed to donate blood. We have to be celibate for a year. Please show me anybody who's out here who's celibate for a year, regardless of sexuality. So little things like that still affect us today. And that's why a lot of us don't go to medical or fear going to medical because of little things like that.
I was actually going to say that power differential only gets reinforced if we expect you to speak up to us. It's our professional roles to not only to open that door and say, what is it you would like me to put in, right? But one of the things that I teach when I teach self-notation is, it's like, make sure that your client actually reviews everything. What would you like me to say? We've talked about this, that, and the other thing. You are a whole lot more than just your diagnosis. It's like trans broken arm syndrome, right? You come in with a broken arm and you're trans. What do they ask you about? Right? And so honestly, how you write things up, in a stable relationship, has chosen not to have any other children rather than, well, she's already had one child and she's with a woman, so she's not going to bear another one. Right? What the hell is that about?
So
I'm an adolescent medicine physician who practices in Washington, D.C. So I have a lot of friends who are also in the military. And I was really struck by your story of how your time in the military affected your family. So how, as a medical provider, what do you think we should be doing for families of service members to let them know that we see them, we know what's going on with their families or with their, parent or whoever is serving, and support them?
That's a great question. And my daughter's pediatrician and I are pretty open so I'm happy with that. So with her doctor, it wasn't as bad, but because I'm a lot more vocal for my child than I am for me, as in all parents, right? It's like a mama bear, like you just become all this strength when it's your children. So I would say, talk to the parent that is in the military. So, the GLBT, and ask them, would they like you to discuss something with their child and how, because that child, like mentally, that was so much on my kids, like my sons and then my daughter, but way more on my sons, that I think put them where my son in the military that almost died for being gay, like he didn't trust doctors either, and as a child growing up, I didn't see that. Like I see a lot more now. So I'm happy you guys are doing this, because as a pediatrician, you can ask, how do you feel? When you're at your parents' base or something, do you feel like you're appreciated, that you're part of the military family? Because that's a lot of weight on a child. Like, I don't belong because of who my mommy is. I can't say this because of who my mommy is. Like, they then start wondering what their own life is, and they question their own family. But I am so out and vocal. I make it very clear to my kids, we're not ashamed of this family. Like, here we are with the pride. Our house should be rainbow. That's how much we are so because we want to showcase to everybody that being who you are, you're okay, and then again, that's why I'm thankful for things like this, because of the medical field. You guys hold such a giant piece to this puzzle that can really help, never less the soldiers, but our children. Because if you look at it, I'd say I'd love a statistic done of the mental health of military children and non, to really see what is happening. And you'd be amazed, I'm sure, by that report of what will come out. So really talk to the parent, and then you can ask a few questions of the child to make sure they feel that it's inclusive and that they don't feel like they don't belong, because they still are straight. Like my child's straight, my daughter. But when you don't feel you belong because of your family, then what? You're questioning your family and you're questioning yourself. So I'd say communicate with the parent and then have a couple key questions for the children.
There's also April is the month of the military child as well. So that's a big thing. So I know you probably know that because we did to say. For people who work with people who are in the military OneSource is still a great, huge, vast amount of resources. And it's for anybody who knows somebody in the military. You don't have to be directly related. If you're a physician working with somebody who is in the military, if you want to look up what other community resources are out there, it is one of the most underrated, under-notified resources out there. So write that one down, Military OneSource. You can Google it. You can look up Month of the Military Child. That'll come up as well. There's a whole bunch of things that will pop up with that. My daughter was lucky. I was deployed before, but working with kids like schools, we track children whose parents are service members. And at least in Connecticut, we have an actual report. We have to notify the state if a child is the child of a military service member. Because if they have to move, military children tend to move a lot. So making community connections is very hard. So when you've seen 5 pediatricians in your life because dad's been moved from here to there to there, or mom's moved from here to there, it makes it very difficult for you. But yeah, that's a great resource to use, this Military OneSource. Yep.
Sorry, I was far away from any microphone. Thank you all so much for sharing. I've learned a lot, which is why I really want to ask this question, because I feel like I was not well trained on this. I do a lot of trainings I've been asked to do trainings for VAs. And and I've heard you speak to a lot of the pieces that really should be incorporated in those trainings, like the really trauma informed and recognition of that, skipping when you get to hear that they're LGBTQ, and at least, embracing that, making sure people feel comfortable. Is there anything else that, in a training for VA that you would really want to make sure that they walk away with? Any highlights?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, I could go off. I didn't have insurance for us, so the VA was my insurance. So that was the thing. The hardest part with VAs for the service members who go, you never see the same doctor twice. So you need to remember that your relationship is brief and important. The other part is, and I'm not saying this to slam anybody in the medical profession, but there is a huge amount of privilege going in the medical profession. I had a psychiatrist, which is why I'm an LPC. I had a psychiatrist say to me, well, why didn't you just not join the military? And I'm in West Haven, Connecticut. So the VA is served by what university? Anybody know? Anybody know West Haven VA? Anybody? Yale University. Yeah. And I looked at that guy and I used some very choice language that I will not repeat here because there is Zoom and it's being recorded. But I let him know that my parents couldn't afford that because when I was a kid, we brushed our teeth with baking soda and peroxide, and we reused soap, and peanut butter sandwiches were breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we weren't that poor, but it was bad for a minute. So going to college like I did, where I paid for all of it to Southern Connecticut State University, the military pays for some if you're in the National Guard. It does not pay for all. The GI Bill does not go forever. So just remember when you sit there, what? It doesn't. I have $39,000 in student loans for my master's. Just remember when you're talking to the service members, you're sitting in a place of privilege. And we know that as medical professionals, anyway, you're sitting there you're hearing people's secrets. Just remember that there's a whole other burden, and there's any military member you'll meet has a chip on their shoulder the size of Gibraltar. And so if you just sit there and be like, I'm really glad I get to sit with you today. Let's talk about some stuff that's important to you today. And I know it sounds really like common sense, but what we know about common sense is not common. So there you go.
I think for me, being in the mental health field now and also speaking with soldiers, the confidentiality piece is still huge. They tell us to get help. They tell us to, let's remove the stigma. Let's do X, Y, and Z. But yet we continue to get soldiers blacklisted because whatever they go get help, it's still not confidential. Right. So a lot of us avoid the VA. I avoid the VA like there's no tomorrow. When I used to use it, I literally saw a different medical provider every time I went. So there was never consistency. Whatever was reported to them, we had to hand in medical records. So nothing stayed confidential. So you ask yourself, why bother going? So confidentiality is huge. It's still an issue today. Especially when I have a 20-year-old who's going through some hardship, who's going through some really tough times at home. And me as a medical, as a clinician saying, hey, go get help. There's the VA, there's the Military One Source. It's all free for us. And in my head, I'm like, don't do it, because I'd rather give you a private practice, but now you don't have insurance, so that's not going to work. So it's hard. We're literally stuck between a rock and a hard place.
I just want to touch one other basis on a woman standpoint of the VA of why I don't go. Yeah. So did you know women don't go to combat? Really? So that was my psychiatrist from the VA as you're going, because I do have PTSD. I was a frontline, a 60 cal gunner on an aircraft. So they had the gaucity, all the guys, weren't even gunner. You got PTSD. And me, they're like, you're a woman. You didn't see combat. And I was like, I need, exactly, honey, exactly. So don't, never less of the LGBT, but even a woman, the VA needs to be a little bit more, the women can do everything a man can do. I won't say the next part, but because I love you guys, but you know what I'm saying? So just, if you have a woman coming in, no matter what, like, listen to them that, we've been shot at, we're the same as a man in there. We earned our uniform the same. It wasn't handed to us. And if anything, you had to try 10 times harder because all I did was compete against men my whole career. And that's okay because that's what I wanted. Why? I got a lot of brothers. But so just, don't assume a woman does not see combat, please, because that does a lot of trauma on the female combat veterans. And like that, I don't go to the VA because I can't trust them.
I think we have time for